Marvel's new Ultimate Universe has officially begun, and we've gone over just how this universe got started already on the channel, but this time I wanted to try something out, and instead of just compiling the story together via the shorts I've already done, let's see how you guys like when we actually go over it in a more put together video. So let's talk about the story of the new Ultimate Spider-Man as we discuss his story up until the most recent issue. But don't worry, by the end of this month, issue number 9 should be out, and we'll have even more to discuss. Now, the context of everything that we're about to explain is that the maker, or the Ultimate Universe version of Reed Richards, who ended up going evil, is basically trying to create a universe where it's impossible for him to lose. So of course, one of the heroes whose life he completely changes in this new universe is Spider-Man, because you know just as well as he does that Spider-Man is one of the greatest heroes ever, and having him against you probably means you're going to be on the losing side 9 times out of 10. Now, after escaping from his prison in the main Marvel universe and heading to a new timeline with the ability to basically go throughout time making various changes, one of the first things we saw the maker do was making sure that on the day Peter Parker went on his school trip along with MJ and everyone else in his class, he wasn't bitten by the radioactive spider, and this would lead his life down a completely different path, as we know that typically Peter is really intelligent, being one of the top students in his school. However, this Peter is way more of a normal guy after these events, seemingly not even going into the field of science, meaning this guy isn't going to be making any web fluid or suits on his own anytime soon. It's at this moment where we begin the new Ultimate Spider-Man run by Jonathan Hickman and Marco Checchetto. So first of all, this is the comic where Peter Parker finally gets to have a happy life, but you know how that goes, right? Like, it's all about to come to an end. After that fateful moment where Peter ended up not being bitten, 20 years go by. And as the snow falls on New York City in the present day, Peter Parker wakes up looking in the mirror thinking, man, I'm not getting any younger. As this older Peter gets dressed and heads into his kitchen, and we see that Peter actually has a family, 2 kids, May and Richard, and of course his wife, Mary Jane Watson. In this world, Peter works for his Uncle Ben and J. Jonah Jameson, who run the Daily Bugle, as they try to make it a hard-hitting news publication that tells the truth. However, eventually Wilson Fisk, their biggest investor, wants to make some changes, causing Peter's uncle and JJ to quit the Bugle. Now, it's important to note that in our last video explaining the start of this Marvel universe, we described how the Maker's forces shot an orbital laser at New York trying to take out Tony Stark and the Ultimates, before blaming the entire incident on the Starks, which is that's crazy to do. That's just nuts. Like, causing a catastrophe and then blaming it on the people that you enacted it upon, that's horrible. Now, this attack cost the lives of a lot of different people, but most importantly for this story, this is actually where the new Ultimate version of Aunt May ended up meeting her tragic end. After walking with Uncle Ben and going to the memorial for the victims, we see Matthew Murdock actually cameo for a second, as eventually Peter starts to explain that he feels like something is missing in his life, and we kind of follow that thread until Peter's home and kind of expresses the same thing to MJ, making Mary Jane more or less tell Peter to follow his instincts, allowing Peter to go and grab a mysterious orb which is holding his powers, and let's discuss how he got that, because he doesn't just have a random mysterious orb which has his powers in it. Now, admittedly, this Peter Parker managed to go 35 years of his life without being Spider-Man, and we keep referring to how happy this life is for him, but it's important to remember that, as we've suggested, without Spider-Man in his life, Peter can feel the empty hole in his life that being a hero should have filled, and that for Peter Parker, maybe being happy and having everything he wants just isn't enough, as at the core of his character, even when stripped away of his biggest burdens, he still craves it without even knowing what's possible. So as Peter stands on his roof with this mysterious orb in his hand, we see a flashback where Tony Stark Iron Lad sent the orb from the future, along with a hologram that explained to Peter that Tony knows the way the world was supposed to be, and this is not it. He tells Peter that 20 years ago he was supposed to be bitten by a spider that would have made him one of Earth's most important heroes, but instead of being the man that inspired everyone to be their best selves, his future was stolen away. At that point, Iron Lad's hologram asked Peter if he wanted that life back. However, Peter had put the orb away, hesitating for a long while about whether or not he should use it, considering how much this could change for him and his family. Now, as we pick back up in the present, with Pete remembering this and finally responding yes, he finally opens the orb, allowing the spider trapped inside to bite him, giving him his powers, and also taking what's called a Picotech suit developed specifically for him to use and hide his identity. Now, you're gonna hear me use that term a few times, Picotech, and I mean, for all intents and purposes, it seems like that's the new, if I can quote comics explain, nanomachine, son, but with enough vagueness to it that neither us nor the characters in the story are able to completely understand how it works, as the man who invented it, Howard Stark, isn't alive anymore to give any details on it. But a little later in this video, we'll explain why it was given to Peter specifically and what this suit will likely become, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself because at this point in the new Spider-Man comic, Peter doesn't even call himself Spider-Man yet. After getting his suit and powers, he travels around the city testing out his abilities, trying to get a better understanding of them, as Peter has all of the usual powers we're used to Spider-Man having except his spider sense, which Peter hasn't fine-tuned or gotten a hang of yet at the very least, which we can tell by just how many times Peter gets caught off guard or surprised in this run so far. Now you may have noticed this sleek black Spider-Man suit he's going around in with no logo on it, and yes, it's badass and we should all want one, but what makes it even more desirable is due to the suit's technology, he can actually change it and make it look like whatever he wants. But since he goes around at night and thinks it looks cool, he goes with the all black. On one of Peter's first patrols, while he practices web swinging, he comes across a man trying to break into a building through the roof, joking that the man must have lost his keys as he tries to talk him into just going home. But unluckily enough for Peter, this actually ends up being the Shocker who tricks Peter in this instance, flinging him off the roof of his gauntlets and getting away. Now personally, it's nice to see that no matter how long it takes Peter in his life to become Spider-Man, his rogues gallery is always just right there ready for him to web them up, and after another few patrols, Peter runs into him again, hitting Shocker so hard that he gives up right away, until we realize that he's just lying, because he's a villain of course, and he blows Peter off the roof again. Now it's this time where we do kind of see what might be evidence of spider sense here in the lines around Peter's head, which I like because you'll see as the story goes on, it definitely does feel like Peter's spider sense is improving more and more, but he's gonna have to get it under control really quickly if he wants to be the real Spider-Man. So as he's going around New York City still learning how to just be Spider-Man in this new Ultimate Universe, after a few nights of patrols, he's starting to be spotted by the public more often, as Peter of course takes the classic opportunity to sell photos of Spider-Man to the Bugle, who's still trying to figure out just what to call this guy. Now the Daily Bugle is actually an interesting topic because there's an entire side plot going on here with Uncle Ben, J. Jonah Jameson, the Daily Bugle, and their very own newspaper. While we will discuss bits of that in this video here and there where it's critically necessary, I'm not going to go too in-depth into this B plot, one, so hopefully if you're interested you actually go and buy the comics, but two, because this plot hasn't really reached the point where we have to focus on it too much, but that'll probably change as we double back around in a future part as it gets more relevant to the current events of the plot. But anyway, as Peter's kids react to the strange guy on the news who May says looks a little scary, Mary Jane comes in asking what all the fuss is about, and Peter plays it off. I mean, credit to him, he's keeping it all secret from his entire family so far, but you know at some point that's gonna have to end, right? Like everything was going really well honestly, but this can only go on for so long. Like honestly, it was going pretty well until after a fight with the Shocker, where Peter comes home for some ice cream while still being in his suit, getting caught by his daughter, who he ends up sharing his secret with. But it's probably a good thing that she knows, because the day after, she's able to lend her father a younger person's eye so they can figure out just how exactly this suit should look. Now, as we've explained, thanks to the Picotech design of the suit, he's able to make it look like anything. So after going through a few options and Easter eggs, we actually do end up with a suit that looks way closer to the classic Spider-Man look. And in the comments, I actually want to play a little game. So the person who in the comments can tell me where each of these suits comes from and what comic they're in, I'll not only pin your comment, but if you have a question about this new universe, I'll make a short dedicated specifically to it. Just include it in your comment and good luck. Eventually, following up on some leads from Uncle Ben and J. Jonah, Spider-Man stakes out one of the Kingpin's locations, trying to learn about another masked character attacking his properties as a fight between the Goblin and Bullseye begins right before his eyes. Now, Bullseye makes fun of the Goblin for attacking Kingpin over and over again like some dog on a leash, telling Goblin that he doesn't work for Fisk, he works for someone higher who looks at Fisk like just another puppet. And it's at this point where as Bullseye is about to finish Gobby off, we see Spider-Man stopping him with his webs, but he gets surprised when Bullseye drops a crane on him, using a few metal cards that he threw at the perfect spots to weaken it. Despite this, Peter makes his way out of the wreckage, mostly avoiding any damage as the man in the Goblin suit helps Peter take Bullseye down and take him into custody. But just as things seem like they're about to calm down, these two stand on the roof asking a few questions back and forth before Goblin presses a button on his suit, which makes Peter's mask fade away. Now we'll get into exactly how he was capable of doing this in a second, but as Peter introduces himself to Harry Osborn, this story is about to get even more interesting because you see eventually we see Peter going to dinner with Harry after the fight with Bullseye, and it actually ends up being a double date with Peter, MJ, Harry, and Gwen Stacy, where Peter learns that Harry has actually told Gwen everything about his life as a hero. As to me, this paints the picture that Harry is definitely a little naive, but he's also really serious about what he does because he feels like he can't even bring bring a child into the world as it currently is, especially after the loss of his father Norman, who died in that attack that we mentioned earlier. Now what's crazy is in this universe, it's actually Harry that gives Peter the "with great power comes great responsibility" speech, as in general we start to learn what this guy's whole deal is. You see, after his father's passing, Harry basically ended up with all of Iron Man's suits because he found them hidden in one of the properties that he now owns. So along with his friend Otto, he managed to repurpose one of these suits and the Stark technology left there to make his very own suit, which is of course the reason that he has some slight control over Peter's suit since they're both wearing Stark tech. In the bathroom, we see Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy having a pleasant conversation for a while, and eventually through reading this run, it's becoming clear that Mary Jane works for Damage Control in this new timeline instead of being a movie star or a world-class model. This is actually really problematic because Damage Control is just a front for a company being run by the Maker that stores the bodies and any evidence of the heroes who are supposed to exist in this timeline. Meaning Peter's wife is literally working for his biggest op, which is something that I'm sure the Maker set up on purpose to make things really difficult for Peter if he ever did somehow manage to manifest his powers, but more on this later. Days go by, and we see Harry and Peter on a patrol like a team, realizing that they don't really know what to call each other besides their names, since neither of them has chosen a codename for themselves yet. Peter tells Harry that the news is calling him the Green Goblin, and even though he says they don't get to pick my codename, he admits that he actually likes it. But Peter is having way more trouble choosing his codename, which is really gonna have to wait until after this mission, as these two crash in through the roof of a building, coming face to face with the Kingpin, and I promise you this version isn't the usual Kingpin you're used to seeing, which becomes way more obvious once these two basically start jumping him together. First, we see as the Kingpin traps them inside of the building and throws all sorts of furniture around trying to take our boys out. But this is way more useful against Harry since, you know, he has no spider sense, as by this point Peter has at least trained his sense enough that he's able to dodge flying furniture without even looking at it, making me wonder why I was ever worried that Hickman wouldn't give Peter one of his most iconic abilities, to be honest. Now as Gobby struggles to keep up, Peter tries to web Kingpin down and give him a good beating, but we see that Fisk is unfazed, grabbing Peter out of the air ready to ruin his face through the mask, as he even tanks one of Goblin's lasers and pumpkin bombs like they're breakfast. Through doing this, it's revealed that Kingpin has actually had surgery to reinforce his body from the inside, giving him a pretty cool tattoo looking design on his skin, and we will see this brought up again in the Ultimate Universe as there are other characters who've gotten some enhancements. However, as Kingpin starts pummeling Green Goblin so hard that the punches literally start to break through his Star Tech armor, he finally turns his attention to Spider-Man, where Kingpin literally puts him through the floor of the room, proceeding to bash his face in over and over, until Harry summons his glider to knock Fisk away long enough that the two of them can escape. Yeah, that was a brutal beatdown. They got it pretty bad. And even though it's all fine and dandy that these two survived, the injuries were way too much for Peter to explain to his family, as his daughter more or less lets it completely spill that he's a superhero in front of everyone, causing Peter to finally have to sit down with the rest of his family and have the talk that yes, Daddy is the mysterious man webbing up the entire city. So after they put the kids to bed, he goes into the bedroom with Mary Jane, where he wonders if she's mad but ultimately smiles when she wants to see him in the suit, and the two of them talk about how this new reality for Peter might change their lives. At this point, the conversation goes to the topic of Peter's code name, and like I said, he's drawing a blank on what to call himself, but MJ puts her hand on his chest and laughs, saying, "Oh Peter, isn't it obvious?" What voice do I do for her? What voice am I supposed to do for her? I don't know. Saying, "Oh Peter, isn't it obvious? You're Spider-Man," as we see him take his wife out for a swing throughout the city, and now we're finally cooking with gas as everything is starting to come together and really feel like the beginning of a great Spider-Man run. Now after all of this is said and done, Peter meets up with Harry since they're both trying to learn more about their suits, so Harry brings on a friend named Otto Octavius, who immediately gets to figuring out how their suits work and how to improve it. The issue is that this guy gives Peter some pretty shifty vibes, and even the art plays with the idea that there's a darkness hidden in this guy. But like Harry says in the issue, when Otto gets like this, you just have to let him cook, making me think it's less of a villainous aura and more of a "why are these idiots still in my lab while I'm cooking" sort of vibe. But this brings us to the origin of the black suit in this new Ultimate Spider-Man universe. You see, as Otto Octavius uses a sample from Peter's suit and some data from their battle so far to permanently upgrade their suits with voice-activated AI capabilities, things start to get a little creepy, as for Harry, the AI in his suit is actually supposed to be a replica of his father, something that's probably going to lead to this version of the Green Goblin becoming more like what we'd expect instead of a hero. However, for Peter, things are actually a little different. You see, for Spider-Man, the AI in his suit is actually supposed to be an exact copy of Peter Parker. This is because Peter says he likes talking to himself, so it seems like a natural decision to make. However, when the suit speaks, we see that it constantly has a black speech bubble, and for the most part, the voice in the suit seems to always compliment Peter and agree with him, making it seem like everything he does is acceptable. This gets weird when Peter gets ready to go to a birthday party and decides that he's going to leave the suit at home, but we see the suit actually talk to him, telling him about all the things that it can do, and specifically that they could do together. And I mean, yeah, super creepy vibes. This thing is definitely going to lead to Venom, so I can't wait to see how. Now, being a little confused about the suit and the changes that Otto made, we see Peter fighting against Harry as they both try and get diagnostic data on their suits, but like we've explained, Harry's suit, using the voice of Norman Osborn, starts driving him a little nuts during a sparring session with Peter and causes him to crash out, sending a massive laser beam Peter's way as it sends him flying into the back of the apartment, bringing their spar to an end. Peter questions if he did something wrong, saying, "Hey, that actually hurt. Are we good? Like, what's going on with gang?" And as Harry tries to apologize, suddenly there's a bright flash in the room as Otto starts to get really strange readings on his computer, since in that moment who else appears before them but Tony Stark Iron Lad himself, returning from his 6-month journey to plant or recruit superheroes all throughout the timeline. At this point, Peter and Tony introduce themselves to each other, allowing Peter to ask why he was shown so much favoritism because his suit is amazing, but it seems super advanced, allowing Tony to explain that the Picotech suit was his father's final creation, and not even Tony knows how it works. But he wanted Spider-Man to have it because he's at the top of the maker's list of heroes who can't be allowed to exist or live in this current universe, which is something that blows Peter back, since of course that's shocking news to hear, but probably not as shocking as the news that Goblin gets, as he's told for some reason he isn't even on the maker's list, something that we the reader know is likely because Harry is due for a massive crash out sooner or later in this run that'll probably keep him from being a hero alongside the other Ultimates. Now, this is something we'll pick up on when we get to our video on the new Ultimates run, as they're actually pretty ahead in the timeline. But wrapping up the beginning of this new Ultimate Spider-Man run, we pick up at Fisk Tower. Here we see Wilson Fisk calling for his team to assemble because the 5 other members are all under his command until the Maker gets back. And as Kingpin waits there menacingly, we see the different members of his group arrive, starting with Mr. Negative, Martin Lee, who in this universe of course still runs and has control over his criminal demons group. Now when he arrives, he realizes that Black Cat is already there. But surprisingly, in this universe, Black Cat is actually Felicia's father, Walter Hardy, who has a pretty big reputation for being the greatest top floor thief in the world. However, in recent years, he's faced of his fair share of tragedy, so it's honestly surprising that he can smile anywhere near as hard as he does. After them, we have the Hunter, Kraven of course, earning a spot after he was kicked out of his homeland and eventually became that guy, needing some sort of challenge in his life after hunting nearly every other creature alive already. As while those three are drinking, we see Mysterio dramatically appear in the room just kind of out of nowhere, looking amazing in this rendition, which is so simple but so striking at the same time. As Mysterio enters, they ask him if he's gotten shorter, which he scoffs at while secretly resizing himself a bit to the correct height, proving that this guy is still putting on a show no matter how cool he looks, so I can't wait to see what his vibe is about in this universe. But finally though, rounding out the group of 6 alongside Kingpin is his most loyal companion, the Mole Man, as the entire Sinister Six gathers to talk about a serious order of business they need to take care of, while we see a folder with Spider-Man and the Green Goblin on it, showing us that things are about to get much more difficult for everyone, but we'll explain that in part 2. Now, until my next long part of this story, you can expect me to keep up with it through my YouTube shorts, and you can of course check out my Marvel Comics playlist on the channel, or I think YouTube officially has it listed as a podcast, where all of my Marvel shorts are waiting, so you can get updated in minute-long chunks if you don't feel like waiting for long videos like these. This isn't the first Spider-Man story I completely covered, since I also previously went over the official Japanese Spider-Man manga, which you can watch right now by clicking the card in the top right. So this is Pineapple, I'll see you guys later. If any of you guys are new here, this is typically where I either do my intro, which is becoming an outro, and yell "hit it," and it's pretty loud, so let me give you first time watchers a warning here. You might want to end the video here. I'll see you later. All right, hit it!